Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar entitled Identifying and Developing Leadership Potential. My name is Peter Banks. I am the founder and CEO of the HR Director. We are a strategic resource for HR and people leaders in digital, print, person, and online. Delighted today to partner with MHS, a leading developer of innovative assessments and solutions with tools for measuring and developing the potential of people. We're also joined by Psysoft, a UK-based occupational psychology consultancy, helping clients to recruit, retain, and develop talented people, all very important elements in today's tough workplace. So by way of a brief intro from me, so identifying and developing leadership potential is one of the most important challenges facing organizations today. The EQI 2.0 leadership report provides leaders and HR professionals with evidence-based framework to understand the emotional and social skills that drive effective leadership. This webinar will explore how the EQI 2.0 leadership report can be used to assess leadership potential, guide development conversations, and support succession planning. You will gain practical insights on how emotional intelligence impacts leadership effectiveness and learn strategies for applying the leadership report to enhance organizational performance. So a little bit of brief housekeeping from me. 1 hour session today. Polls, we want you to get involved. So we're on a number of polls. They'll pop up. The way we do them is a separate bit of software. Chat box to the right will pop up in the chat. The link there, click on it, and it'll take you to a kind of question and answer, and just select your most preferred answer. We'll share them back as we go, and we'll have a little quick discussion around them. Questions. We want you to get, as we always say with our webinars, as much as possible from this. So please do ask any questions, and I will put them to our panel today. Any we can't get through, we'll come back to at the end. And if we can't fit them in, we will come back to you after the webinar. So please get the most from this session. Secondly, let's get underway then. So joining us today, firstly, is Imogen de Vries, who is Senior Consultant at our partner today, Psysoft. So hi, Imogen, and thank you for taking part today.
Yeah, hi, it's great to be here. Really looking forward to talking about emotional intelligence, but also how that kind of links with leadership potential. A bit about us as a kind of occupational psychology consultancy. So we specialise in different psychometrics, including the kind of EQI, which we will be talking about today. And we have clients kind of from all over the world, including in the HR space, so including talent management, leadership development, recruitment and selection. So we're helping, as you said, kind of attract and retain employees in that space as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Imogen. Mia, as well, could you just tell a little bit about, so Mia George, who's a consultant at Psysoft, tell a little bit more about your role there as well at Psysoft.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm, as you said, a consultant here at Psysoft. Imogen and I both come from a psychology background, and we work very closely delivering lots of different psychometric training. I think there's been a couple of those this week already, largely on emotional intelligence, but on various other tools as well. Personality, you name it, it's probably on the list somewhere. We also spend a lot of time making, summary reports for selection, recruitment, development. We do a lot of providing feedback as well, partly to leaders, as we're going to be talking about a bit today. But in general, as a consultancy, we're always looking for ways to help people integrate psychometrics into their work and reap the benefits from it. But I'm looking forward to talking much more about that this morning.
Fantastic. Thank you both. Thank you, Mia. Right. Well, let's get stuck in, shall we? So let's turn to our first question. Imogen, if I could come to you. So why, I guess, is identifying and developing leadership potential such a key challenge for organizations today?
Yeah, I think it's one of those huge questions, isn't it? And in today's organisational landscape, I think there's a lot of expectations that are placed on employers, probably more than ever. They've got to manage that kind of financial stability. They've got to meet stakeholder demands. They've also got to achieve those kind of more strategic goals. But perhaps the most important part of all of that is managing and kind of supporting the people. I would say that unfortunately, this isn't always a priority for organisations, and I do think that's dangerous because people are involved in every aspect of the organization, as we know. And I think with the ongoing challenges of employee retention, engagement, managing the kind of hybrid or remote workforces, make it quite difficult for organizations to kind of thrive. And essentially employees as well will look for someone to guide them through that whole process. And what we're really seeing is kind of a shift in what leadership looks like. It's not as much nowadays as that kind of top-down process as it once was. But because of all of these different challenges, the future leaders aren't always visible. So they might be working from home, they might be tied up in that kind of bureaucracy that also means that we don't see their potential, perhaps as we would have normally in kind of a traditional workplace or workplace environment. You've also got the introduction of artificial intelligence, which is becoming one of the biggest infiltrations of organizations, and many employees are starting to worry about job security and the impact on communication. People are writing emails with AI and writing reports with AI. So how are we kind of separating the human from the tool? And should we actually be doing anything about that? So should we be assessing raw skills as well as kind of those technology skills, and how people integrate emotional intelligence in that and connect the kind of human side of those things. But the reality really is that leaders sit in the center of all of that. Employees look for support, look for guidance, look for inspiration, and not just in what they say, but also looking at how leaders behave. So that's why it's really important that the people that we put in those roles are equipped to lead effectively and to adapt to change and create the right environment for kind of others to succeed. There's that kind of saying that people don't leave bad organizations, they leave bad managers. And we see that from our clients so many times with feedback sessions and just listening to some of their stories. Leaders are so important in helping engagement. And of course, it's kind of HR professionals as well who are expected to drive a lot of those changes and manage the impact, and support leaders and identify those leaders. So I think just there's a whole range of environmental factors as well as people factors that make it a really large challenge and quite a complex challenge as well.
Yeah. I mean, we all know that as you just rightly say, it's such a disruptive kind of world that we live in at the moment, and workplaces, tech, AI, all those things you said. It's just a huge change from kind of where we were. So the leadership we need is changing measurably from what we had before. So I totally agree. Okay, good. So let's get into our first poll, shall we? Let's so what we're going to do, we're going to pop up in the chat there, everyone. So if you have a look, it should pop up, and there'll be a link that will take you to your choice for your first question. So that should come up now. Click on that link. It'll wing you through to the questions. Make your choice. I'll just read out the question. So our first poll. So which of these skills do you think are most important for leaders in your organizations today? So is it A, self-awareness and empathy? Is it B, communication and collaboration? Is it C, decision-making and problem-solving? Or is it D, technical or role-specific expertise? So if you can have a little go at that one, and we'll share the kind of poll results in a moment. Obviously, just choose the most relevant which you feel. Imogen, let me just, I'll have a bit of fun with these, so we'll come to you and see how you get on with what are you going to predict is going to be top here?
Oh, it's difficult because I mean, I'm probably biased in thinking that all of these are really important. I'd probably say decision making and problem solving is going to be higher, as the reasons I kind of mentioned before, with all the kind of complexities in the workplace. I think that to be a leader, you've got to kind of navigate those different areas, and problem solving is part of that, I guess, an important skill.
I think we've got a few issues with the poll at the moment. So I know, Bina, if you're in the background just trying to sort that one out, it seems like clicked it again. There we are. So a bit. So if you click on it the second time, try that, everyone, and let's see if we can get in there. Here you go. So I think it was just locked down. Brilliant. Okay. Well, Mia, have you got any thoughts? I'll just come to you quickly while we're waiting for those to come in.
Yeah, again, I'm probably biased because we've all got our favourite parts of the EQI or emotional intelligence. I probably would think the self-awareness for me feels very, very key. There's not necessarily a start and an end to emotional intelligence, but that self-awareness is definitely going to be, if there was a start and an end, the self-awareness would fall towards the beginning. So for me, I think I'd probably, if I was forced to pick, I think I'd probably go for that first one.
Okay, brilliant. All right, well, let's take a look at the result. Yeah, so top answer, 43% decision making and problem solving, 30% self-awareness and empathy, 22% communication and collaboration, and just 4% technical or role specific. So that's good news, actually. So yeah, Imogen, thoughts on what you've just seen there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be smug and said I predicted it, but
Oh no, please do.
No, I think the two ones that Asmir and I would have discussed are probably definitely the ones that we'd see as being most important. And I think with the technical role specific experience, as you said, it's quite nice to see that actually people don't think that is as important. I think a lot of the time when we are thinking about leaders and the way people get into those leadership positions are often based on that kind of technical and role specific expertise. But actually really what we should be looking at is how they manage people and the impact of their leadership style, which doesn't come from technical and role specific expertise. But I'm glad to see that there are other areas that people think are more important to be considering.
And it's the classic kind of one, isn't it? In terms of, as you rightly say, people are kind of put into manager positions to start with from that technical expertise, which is kind of, and sometimes they haven't got the skill set or learning to actually manage people in that way, and actually you take them away from what they're very, very good at. So, and that's the same with leadership. So absolutely good to see. Good. All right. So let's go to our second question. Thank you for taking part in those, everyone. Mia, so let's talk emotional and social skills. So what's kind of needed today by our leaders to drive effective leadership in this very different world that we live in?
Yeah, no, it's such an important question. I think partly we might have touched on that already with the poll, but before I kind of dive into why emotional and social skills are going to be relevant, I'd love to turn it around on you and the people watching as well. I think one of our favorite little activities we do with leaders about emotional intelligence is to ask people to just think in their mind, imagine the best leader that you've ever interacted with. Just picture that person. If there's an immediate person that comes to mind, and just think to yourself about what made that person a great leader. Any particular memories that kind of stand out for you? How did they behave? What were those characteristics that they showed consistently? And just think in your head about what that would be. What is it that stands out in your mind? And like I said, we often do these sorts of activities, and really across the board, I don't think anyone's ever come out and said, oh, I remember how technically savvy they were, or how long they've been at the company. That, oh, I literally can't remember a time that's ever happened. I think it's almost always things like, they listened to me when I was having a hard time. They supported me when I was struggling to complete this task. They were honest with me about feedback and development, pushing people to do their best and meet their goals. These are all the things that really stand out to us. And I think that's not a new thing. It's always it's the saying of it's not what you say, but it's how you say it, and it's how you make people feel. And it really could not be more true. And when we think about all these things that people are saying, like supportive and trusting and inspiring, they're not technical skills. They're all soft skills, if people want to use that term. And actually, if you take it one step further and break it down even more, it's actually all emotional intelligence when you think about it. A leader that is supportive is probably going to be demonstrating high levels of empathy, understanding how their team's feeling, being able to pick up on those emotional cues, probably showing strong interpersonal relationships, building those networks of people around them, those trusting and mutually beneficial networks. If there's someone that is inspiring to be around, leading their team through inspiration, it's going to need an element of optimism within that, which is another soft skill in the EQI, having that positive outlook, even when there's challenges and setbacks, maintaining positive, expectations about it. That self-actualization piece as well, not just from Maslow's hierarchy, but also again from the EQI model, about having that drive and motivation to lead others. So these are actually all emotional intelligence subscales. And I think it's so important to link it back to that and show this is, this is what we remember, this is what stands out to us. It's not all about, those technical skills, although of course they're still relevant, but what we remember is those soft and more emotional intelligence skills and how we make other people feel in those moments. But even if you flip it around as well, instead of looking about what drives effective leadership, we can also think about what prevents that from happening, what drives ineffective leadership, specifically more around the area of what, leadership derailment side of things as well. And there's some research behind the EQI tool that we're discussing today about which of the subscales actually, when lower scores, contribute towards a higher risk of derailment. And there were some that they mentioned were things like impulse control. If you have lower scores in impulse control, it's going to be quite difficult as a leader, which requires a lot of flexibility, control, focus, deliberate planning, of projects and sequences, rather than an individual that's likely to, be impulsive, react quickly, and be less predictable in that sense. Also, things like lower scores on stress tolerance. As we've said, there's so much going on at the moment. There are so many pressures, external, internal, whatever it might be. So having a leader that's got lower scores on stress tolerance might be a bit difficult for them to, think clearly about decisions and be able to withstand that sort of pressure. But I mean, that's the other side of thinking about it in terms of derailment. But when you take it all together, like I said, it's those things that we remember about those good leaders that are all demonstrated by those emotional and social skills that I think really makes a case for why they're useful.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I think, and again, emotional intelligence, we just know that it's such a huge part now. And again, I keep saying that it's complicated and technical and very different, disruptive world we live in. So, in terms of that emotional side is so key. Let me just ask anyone got any questions, please? There's a chat, the Q&A there. So please just drop any questions in to our panel you might have, and I will ask them as we go as well. So, okay, good. Imogen, so okay, so how do you assess leadership potential then? So tell us a little bit about how would you do that?
Yeah, I mean, as we've kind of established, leadership has quite a huge impact on performance, engagement, the organizational culture as a whole. It's going to be what you remember most, whether that be positive or negative. You've got all of those qualities that, yes, you remember the best leader that you've ever had, but equally you probably remember the worst leader you've ever had. And it comes into those emotional skills of someone being explosive, someone, being avoidant in their responsibilities or micromanaging or whatever it might be. And so identifying that leadership potential early on can be really beneficial. And I mean, we've already spoken about how a lot of leaders or managers are promoted due to experience and technical expertise. But often people are placed into those roles and they suddenly have this, oh gosh, I don't actually know how to lead a team. I haven't worked with these individuals. I'm very used to working on my own and doing a good job of what I do. But that gap is really visible, and it comes into awareness quite quickly, and it impacts the organization quite quickly as well. So really that kind of impact, whether it's positive or negative, is down to the support available, and you as organizations and as HR departments have an opportunity to make sure that impact is positive. I think I read a article recently that found that employees who rate their managers poorly are 4 times more likely to be interviewing for another job, compared to employees who are rating their managers highly. That's huge. If you've got the opportunity to be encouraging successful leaders who look after their people and bring people along with them, then you're going to be retaining your employees a lot better. And again, it highlights my point earlier about how people leave bad managers and not necessarily bad organizations. I think traditionally organizations tend to assess leaders through performance reviews, KPIs or appraisals, often kind of focusing on the qualifications, the tenure, again, the technical expertise. And it does create a divide, I think, between what we would consider a manager and what we would consider a leader. They're kind of two separate terms, and leaders don't necessarily have to be in hierarchical positions, but what we want them to do is to encourage that kind of team collaboration and improve company culture in a way that's kind of psychological safe, and have that environment where individuals feel confident, feel like they can go the step further in terms of what they're doing at work, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a direct report or someone below them in the kind of hierarchical scale. It could just be a peer and someone that they can lead through and drive those kind of questions. And so from our perspective, that's where psychometrics come in, because they provide kind of an objective measure of an individual's strengths and development areas. And importantly, they can assess potential as well as current capability. So psychometrics aren't just that kind of typical survey or questionnaire that you might see land in your inbox. I'm sure we've all had them from circulating around, but there are assessments that are actually built from rigorous research. They're designed to be objective, they're designed to be valid, and they're that measurement of an individual to kind of see where those different areas lie that we can potentially identify. So in particular with the kind of EQI, there's the leadership report, which is looking at leadership potential. So it looks at kind of a broad range of emotional and interpersonal skills that are underpinning effective leadership. And that's been shown from research connecting to kind of the transformational leadership style that we are kind of striving towards. And as Mia said, it does also explore derailers. So we're not just looking at how effective someone is now or where they can generally develop, but also pinpointing areas where research has shown to link to more of a kind of passive leadership style. So if you're using this in kind of recruitment and selection, you can identify candidates that are best suited to leadership roles by matching their kind of emotional and social functioning to the demands of the actual position. But if you're using it in development, then you can actually prepare individuals for those leadership positions. So if you've already identified that someone is technically capable and they've got that kind of tenure, how can you then prepare them before they're put into that leadership position? So it's making sure that those steps are in place before they're kind of thrown in at the deep end. But that's where, psychometrics, I think, are the key to bridging that gap.
Okay, that's interesting. And also, so Mia, from your point of view, so I mean, I guess we're talking an evidence-based kind of framework here then. So what's the advantages of that? Just share the audience with that.
I think it's a really useful point that often people overlook when they see kind of a shiny new psychometric. They're just thinking about all the benefits and useful things, which is obviously brilliant, but it's also important to think, in part skeptically, we need to dive into the background of these tools. We need to know whether they're going to be worth our time and whether they're actually doing what they're going to say they're going to do. So I always encourage people to think about reflecting on what the tool is. Is it fit for purpose? The evidence base behind that. I think a lot of people do need to pay attention to it. But at its core, an evidence-based framework in this context is about using tools that are built on that scientific research and that scientific data. So I'm sure many out there that are just kind of there's many different trends that happen, management trends, new fads, and you see a little quiz pop up at the end of it. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about that scientific empirical data. So an evidence-based framework is one that has been tested, it's been validated, shown that it's reliable, and really it means that we can predict to have meaningful outcomes. So we're not just kind of going in there blind, but we know what we're looking for and we know what we can gain from it. I think to break it down into the three main benefits of an evidence-based framework is firstly just that trust and credibility that we can have with a tool. For leaders, for organizations, but either way, they have the confidence that the insights they're receiving from that report are accurate, they're meaningful, they're realistic, they're not just based on, an implicit theory or a personal idea, someone that's being overly optimistic, but it is accurate and it is meaningful and supported in the literature. It also provides consistency as well and structure. So when you're talking about scientifically sound, but also standardized frameworks as well, it means that everyone's got the same platform. We're all speaking the same language. We're being compared against the same groups of individuals. It really encourages a shared understanding of what we mean when we talk about good leadership or effective leadership. And then that allows people to track their development, in a clear and measurable way, and in the same way as other people as well. So it means that they can meaningfully compare results among candidates as well. So because we have that consistent structure, if one person takes this assessment and another person does, and they choose the same norm group, we can see how they fare in comparison with each other. So it's all consistent and comparable, which is a big plus as well. I think last but not least is also the idea of impact. So ultimately, we're using these psychometric tools for a reason, or at least we should be analysing, having a needs assessment, hopefully in the best case scenario. But we're ideally looking to make some sort of change or some sort of impact. And by using these evidence-based frameworks, we can bridge that gap between, the quite theoretical research that we see on Google Scholar, but then actually what we do in practice and what people are doing on the ground in their day-to-day lives. So by using these tools, we can translate all that research and the useful information, but into something that is practical. People can just take and they can use and they can reap the benefits of that and produce some actionable insights on the back of it. And the EQI 2.0 specifically stands out, being based on 30 years of this research that I'm talking about. Thousands of different individuals from a variety of different industries has gone into the creation of the tool. So it really is that reliable and valid assessment. So it's not only just valid in that we really are talking about emotional intelligence here. If you get a score of mid-range score, we are really talking about EI. We're not talking about personality or ability or anything like that. But it's also reliable as well. So we have an understanding that if someone takes it again the next day, it's not going to be wildly different. It's going to be consistent in that nature. I think specifically for practitioners, the advantage of using these evidence-based frameworks is, again, it's that trust. They can trust the data on the ground. They know that it's reliable. They know it's going to have consistent results and that it really is measuring what it claims to measure. But for leaders specifically that are, on the receiving end of this information and these reports, it means that the feedback isn't just, an exciting meeting they had that day or something new to look at. It's actually going to be actionable for them. It can lead to significant improvements that I'm sure we'll touch on today about performance, well-being, development. And it's going to have actionable insights for themselves, for other people, and they're going to have real impact as a result of that. So that's a lot of information, but overall, an evidence-based framework really just provides us that consistent, fair, reliable and practical tool, which means that we can bridge that gap into the real world and help leaders not only encourage their self-awareness, but become genuinely more effective in the way that they communicate with others as well.
Perfect, thanks, Mia. Again, as we get into some of the detail there, so any questions, please do pop them on the Q&A. Okay, let's run our second poll. So again, this will pop up in the chat. And you can take a part. So this one is, how does your organization currently develop your leaders? So is it A, assessment and feedback, B, workshops, C, e-learning, or D, other? So if everyone can have a go at that one, please, and we will feed those back in. Mia, what do you think is going to come top here? Did well last time.
I think, in our most recent survey, I think it was mostly psychometric assessments that people tended to use in order to develop, skills within their leaders. So maybe something around assessment and feedback, but I know also there's a big push at the minute for online digital learning. So that makes me lean towards e-learning instead, somewhere between those two, I think.
Yeah, Imogen?
I'm going to be controversial. I'd probably say workshops. I think a lot of individuals are kind of taking that kind of team space, especially now that we are kind of more of a hybrid workforce. Workshops allow everyone to kind of come together a little bit and actually, speak and get to know each other a bit more in perhaps a way that we don't always. But as Mia said, the majority of our clients are using kind of psychometrics to then support workshops. So maybe a combination of the both.
Fantastic. Right. Okay. Well, let's find out. So let's see what the results are. Wow, look at that. Imogen, you win a gold star, I think. Yeah, that workshop's 40%. And then Mia not far behind, 27%. Yeah, so assessment and feedback. And then, yeah, 20% other, and e-learning, 13%. Obviously, 20% the other would be quite interesting to know,
Yeah,
I guess. So
say
again,
I'd love to know what the other is. So
yeah,
please
pop
pop
them
that
on
in
the
the chat.
Q&A perhaps if anyone's got some ideas there, that'd be good. All right, good. Thank you very much. Thoughts? I mean, just brief sum up on that. Any Imogen, I guess, Mia?
Yeah, as I said, it doesn't massively surprise me. I'd be interested as well to know what kind of assessments people are using and whether that is focused on kind of leadership development, and what aspects of perhaps leadership they are assessing. But yeah, I think the real what's that opportunity, I think, for organizations is to actually combine these different areas to produce kind of a full package, because on their own, more often than not, we see individuals taking an assessment. They go, oh yeah, that's interesting, put it in a drawer, and then it's never spoken or seen about again. So really having that process of taking the assessment, having that kind of full debrief, working on an action plan, but then also implementing that into a workshop as well, integrating it with other people within the organization. What do other people think about these different areas, and how do they potentially work together to support development, but also how they can utilize their different skills that they have but might not appreciate from other people as well. We see people identify gaps within these psychometrics that then they can really focus in on those workshops. So I think there's a real opportunity for streamlining those different areas kind of all together, and not necessarily just focus on one piece.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly looking at the chat there. So thanks everyone feeding those in. So yeah, I mean, people are saying some of the combination of workshops, external, internal training, and virtual learning. So, and then equally, yeah, what we've got there, option, yeah, several difficult poll to answer. Kind of get that, because it is a blended approach. So yeah, thanks for that. So options on a number of years now have been taken with blended approach, steer and research, and we use it for several years. So yeah, it's good to see what everyone's kind of using a combination there. Okay, good. Right, let's move on. The time is pressing, so let's look at. So we've kind of looked at sort of discovering your leaders, your potential leaders for the future. So Imogen, how do you? Let's talk about guiding and developing conversations to support. Certainly, this is all about succession planning here as well, isn't it? So really important part.
Yeah, and it kind of touches on what I was saying just then, in that kind of combination. And I think once you have identified those future leaders, the next step is to kind of translate those insight into those development conversations, but quite practical succession planning as well. So not just having conversations, but making it kind of involved and reflective. And I think a good starting point is to focus on kind of 3 questions. So what are individuals already doing well? What do they need to do more of to be ready for that kind of next step? But also, what should they perhaps stop doing that might be holding them back, or at least kind of pause in doing? It might be that currently they're really, really independent, which can be great, but when do they need to think about the others? When do they need to think about the team? And can they take a moment to just pause and think about the meaningfulness of those behaviors, and thinking about what the individuals are already doing well? They're in that place for a reason. They've got to that space for a reason. So reflecting on that, bringing up that confidence. We often see leaders with that massive imposter syndrome, so making sure that they're aware of why they're there is really important. And I think it helps personal development, but also the kind of growth mindset of believing in yourself and actually knowing that you do have the expertise, and that you can bring in other skills like the people side to make yourself kind of a well-rounded leader, and not just kind of a technically led leader. I think those kind of simple frameworks help guide those conversations to make sure they are kind of constructive and balanced, but also focused on growth and not just kind of criticism of what you're doing wrong. And I think that's really important, as I said, to kind of battle that imposter syndrome. But I also think it's important to track that performance versus the potential. So I know that a lot of organizations kind of use talent matrix, so mapping individuals based on their current performance and their future potential. And I think it's those people who sit in the kind of top right corner that you're going to be your emerging leaders. So that's where the targeted development becomes really crucial. So the individuals who are both, extremely performing well in their kind of current performance, but then there is also that future potential for them to lead going forward. In the other quadrants, they're kind of your individuals that potentially there's opportunity there, and then maybe they need kind of a longer development plan for that. But beyond that, it's important to understand the kind of individual's personal goals as well. Do they actually want to be a leader? Is my first question always. As I think you mentioned earlier, Peter, that individuals who sometimes are in these roles, they're good at their technical skills because they love their job and love what they're doing. And often, actually, when you're in that leadership position, you sometimes lose some of that responsibility of actually doing the practical job. And so being a leader and taking that away from someone isn't for everyone. So actually making sure it's where they want to be. If they do want to be a leader, who are they aspiring to become as a leader? Do they have that person that Mia was talking about earlier this morning about the person that they imagine and remember as their best leader, and are they aspiring to become that person? So what are the differences between themselves and that person they're aspiring to be? So I really think that aligning the kind of organizational needs for that leader with the personal motivation is helping for that development and making it kind of more meaningful, but also more sustainable. Because if you're putting in the leaders and they don't have that connection and they don't have that emotional connection, you might see more dropout and you might see more derailment behaviours as well. So we do have something with the EQI, which is a group report, and that can be quite useful at this stage as well, because it allows you to look at kind of collective emotional intelligence. So whether you can see across your kind of leadership team or your talent pool, the current strengths and development areas. So it can be used to kind of identify shared gaps among future leaders. And then that insight can kind of shape your development programs to help build resilience and stronger decision making. So, for example, one of our clients used the group report and found that as a whole, their leaders were lower on social responsibility. And that was really interesting for them because one of their biggest values as an organisation was social responsibility. So for them to highlight this, they then were able to really drill into what it was that was stopping that development and stopping that behaviour. So what they did is they targeted and brought workshops in, as we were talking about earlier, to really focus on social responsibility and bringing in people's motivation and making sure that they are bringing the social consciousness that they're interested in, and not just perhaps as an organization. Another one of our clients uses the EQI leadership report alongside other assessments to identify potentials aspiring to be assistant directors, and this helped them not just to kind of understand each individual's readiness, but it did also help them identify those areas for growth and again design kind of targeted development plans, this time at an individual level, to help them be more effective when they are eventually within those leadership positions. So I think it's really just combining that data-driven insight, making sure you're having open but also really honest conversations, and that everyone is kind of aligned on the same page. And that way you're going to create a much more clearer but also a strategic approach to succession planning as well.
Yeah. We're running out a little bit of time, but I guess some of that you've just answered, actually, but a question there about what are the ways of inspiring reticent potential leaders, the ones that lack confidence, which I guess some of that you just covered. But is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's that approach of, again, reflection of where they see themselves in 5 years' time, whatever it might be, and that reflection of people's achievements. So whether it be encouraging one-to-ones where you do have a portion of that one-to-one talking about development, but also maybe even 360 feedback for those individuals who are lacking in confidence, so that they can see that they are making an impact on their team, or their managers, or so on. And again, coming from more of an objective standpoint, you're looking at the individual's potential areas of strengths from different people, so they aren't just relying on their kind of own self opinions or whatever it might be.
Okay, great. Right, let's crack on. We're going to probably run slightly, so hopefully people can bear with us. Mia, so we talked about emotional intelligence, the importance of at the start, really. So can emotional intelligence enhance organizational performance? Yes or no? No, got a bit more detail.
I mean, in short, yes, absolutely. I think if anything, it's hard to answer with one word, because there's so much research out there. I mean, like I said earlier, it's like 30 years that this has been in the work. So there is a huge amount of research, especially that validity research, talking about, what actually does this tool do? What is the purpose of this? What are the benefits? And I'll try and summarize kind of the ones that I think would be most relevant. I'll cherry pick our best ones. But when we talk about the benefits of harnessing emotional intelligence truly, it's always kind of top three: performance, well-being, leadership. Those are always the top three. But I think just to pick out the job performance piece a bit more, there's a huge amount that goes on there. I think I was having a look beforehand into some of that research that people might find interesting, but there was a meta-analysis, so a pretty significant study, which found that emotional intelligence was a significant positive predictor of job performance. And it actually went as far as to explain nearly 20%, so nearly a fifth of variance of a performance in a job. So that's a huge amount of variance, meaning that there's a significant relationship between the two, and that higher emotional intelligence does absolutely contribute towards improved job performance, which I think really encapsulates that benefit. But there's also a side of it that, ultimately organizations aren't looking at the bottom line. They want to know about the financial aspect to it. And there was another statistic about organizations which take the step to measure but also track emotional intelligence, so really bringing that on board, were found to be 16% more likely to report positive revenue growth in the future, compared to those that said that they valued emotional intelligence, but they didn't actually take actionable steps to measure and track that within their organization. So it's really showing that talking about it is brilliant and fantastic and useful for spreading the word, but actually taking that on board and taking steps to action it is really what's going to make the biggest difference there. When it comes to sales as well, we've been talking about that a lot recently with one of our clients, about the impact on sales results for those organizations. And again, there's absolutely a link there between higher EI and sales, especially in those kind of high stakes, high pressure, quick turnaround roles. But there was one business that's quoted in the research where higher EQI scores explained actually nearly a third of the sales in the organization. So compared to those that had lower scores, so again, really significant impact there on that capacity for sales, specifically within the EQI. So there's a huge amount that correlates specifically with job performance. I know today we're talking a bit more about leadership and that selection planning side of things. So the other benefit there definitely falls within the selection assessment stage of recruitment, as a screening tool, as an interviewing tool, just to be used in that process. But one of our favourite case studies that we talk about a lot is one from a set of debt collectors, where they used the EQI scores within that recruitment process. And they actually found that those that they recruited with higher EQI scores on average met 163% of their quotas, but those with lower scores only met about 80. So that's over twice the difference there by just implementing that EQI into the recruitment stage. So if you're looking to improve efficiency in the recruitment, then it's absolutely leaning towards a positive place to be implementing that. But I know today we're specifically talking about leadership, and I think one of the strongest correlations and connections absolutely lies between effective leadership and emotional intelligence. So it's consistently linked in the literature and the research between the two topics. I think levels of high EI have definitely been found to support successful leadership performance, especially when we're getting to those much more executive levels, like we touched on at the beginning, where those social skills are really going to have a greater impact than some of those technical skills. So really at the top, it has a huge amount of impact. But specifically within transformational leadership as well, so that lovely topic that everyone likes to talk about, if we're specifically talking about those leaders that are looking to, I think Imogen was speaking about this, but that kind of inspirational element, bringing people with them, you know, that side of things. Again, a consistent link in the literature between higher scores of emotional intelligence and the qualities that's necessary for transformational leadership. So if you're looking towards that side of things, it's hugely important there. Like I said, you know, that's just really just a snippet of the research. There's also, as mentioned, parts about employee engagement. There's also lots of well-being aspects that are relevant as well. But overall, there's absolutely a connection between the two, and there's a huge case to be made for improving organizational effectiveness using these sorts of emotional intelligence tools.
Thank you. Pretty thorough, I think, absolutely, and pretty kind of pretty obvious what to do there. So let's quickly run our final poll. This one again will pop up in your chat. Click on the link quick because we won't last long on this one. How well do you think your organization's succession planning incorporates emotional intelligence? So pretty apt one at the moment. A, very well. EI is integrated into our approach. B, somewhat. It's discussed but not assessed. C, not much. EI is rarely considered. Or D, not at all. Focus is mainly on technical skills or tenure. So if everyone can have a little pop at that one, and just very briefly while we wait, Mia, quick prediction from you.
I'm not very good at this game so far. I think Imogen is winning, but I'm going to go for I'll go for somewhat. Number 2, somewhat integrated.
Imogen.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree. I'd say somewhat as well. I think from our client's perspective, it's one of those things that is people are definitely aware of, and it's talked about. It's becoming quite a buzzword, and especially corporate spaces, but it's not necessarily measured or kind of looked at objectively. So yeah, I'd probably say somewhat.
Right. Okay, let's have a little look at the results then. Right. Okay. So yes, 64%. Somewhat, but discussed but not assessed. Right. So that's the highest one. Interesting. And then 21% not at all, 14% not much, and 0% on very well. So okay, all right. So we really haven't got time to kind of discuss that, but I think we'll move on to the last question. But food for thought there. Let's finish up then. Really. So Imogen, just back to you. Really. You know, I think we kind of talked about this throughout. So many challenges for leaders today. Disruptive world of work. You know, so just how do you support leaders in building, I guess, self-awareness, resilience, and adaptability, all key traits really required at the moment?
Yeah, I think as part of this, it's the reminder that leaders shouldn't feel like they need to have all of the answers. And I often think that drives that kind of imposter syndrome. It drives that perhaps lack of resilience, because there's that pressure of feeling like they need to know everything and they need to be able to support the organization throughout this whole process. But really having the kind of self-awareness and adaptability is more essential than just having the answers. And again, psychometrics, I think, do give that space for reflection. Leaders don't naturally create space for themselves to have self-reflection. You know, they're moving quickly, they're solving problems, they're supporting their team's development, but do they actually ever take a moment to think about themselves and their own feedback? Not as much. So from my perspective, I think it's really encouraging them to pause, ask reflective questions. You know, if there is quite emotionally driven situations, thinking about what emotions am I experiencing in this situation, how might those emotions be influencing my decisions right now, but also how might they be impacting others in this situation. You know, tone of voice, the energy you're bringing into a room, going back to that kind of psychological safety and the environment or culture that a leader is creating. If you're not aware of that, then that's going to be potentially really damaging, because you're disrupting the peace almost, or disrupting the environment that you're in. So I think those kind of small practical moments of reflection can have quite a big impact. from there, I think developing resilience and adaptability becomes easier because you're then recognizing those emotional triggers and you've built strategies to stay composed and kind of solutions focused, because you know that when you're in this meeting, I don't know, your heart rate goes up, but you have the strategies in place to kind of cope with that. So with those reports, with those psychometrics, there's more of an understanding of how those are actually impacting you, and how you can leverage your strengths. So balancing perhaps optimism with realism, you might be able to balance your empathy with assertiveness to help you kind of make sure that people are receiving information in the best way possible. But yeah, those kind of targeted steps to make leaders become more intentional, make them become more aware of themselves, more responsive rather than kind of reactive, but basically just more adaptable in a world that is continuously changing and will never stop changing.
Lovely, thank you. Right, okay. Listen, thanks so much. Sorry we've gone over everyone, but thanks. That brings us to the end of the webinar today. Hope you've gained some practical insights in, I guess, how to assess leadership potential, guide development conversations, and support succession planning from today's session. So through this webinar, we've kind of learned about emotional intelligence, the impacts, leadership effectiveness, and explored key strategies for using and applying the leadership report to enhance organizational performance. So thanks to my panel today, Imogen and Mia, for your excellent insights, experience and knowledge. It's been really good. And also to MHA and Psysoft for partnering with us. There is a recording of the webinar, which we'll kind of send out to you all, so you can revisit and share. And also we will include some useful resources as well from Psysoft as well, which are kind of going to add some value to the conversation we had today. And thank you all for kind of sticking with us and watching and taking part in the poll. So yeah, thank you very much. So thanks, Imogen, thanks, Mia, and bye for now, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.